welcome to this week's show. This week all about Princess Caraboo. Who on earth was Princess Caraboo? I hear you saying. Well, what an interesting story this week, huh? In England, in Glastonbury, in Almondsbury, small town in Glastonbury, in 1817, 3rd of April 1817, there appeared in this town this young lady, dressed very exotically, very mysteriously, with a high Muslim collar and a black turban, right? This young lady who spoke some completely ineligible, strange language, before this cobbler, this young man who was a cobbler, basically. He knew about cobbling. And, yeah, he didn't know anything about mysterious women dressed in black turbans with high Muslim collar and spoke strange languages. So he took him to his wife, and she didn't know much about those sort of thing either. So they said, right, we'll take her to the local poorhouse, and the overseer there, Mr. Overton, he can sort her out, because at that time, in post-Napoleonic era, right, in Britain, poor people, beggars, were treated with a lot of suspicion because they might be spies. And as it turned out, she was taken by Mr. Overton, who couldn't make heads or tails of her either, to the local magistrate in Knowle Park, a Mr. and Mrs. Worrell. And as it turned out, she actually had some counterfeit money on her, which made things even worse for her. However, she didn't seem to bother. She didn't mind the fact that at that time having counterfeit money on you could result in the death penalty. She was very strange. She had a very mystical kind of persona and mannerisms, and yeah, people just didn't know what to make of her. She stayed with the Worrells. However, they thought, she can't really sleep here tonight. We will take her to the local inn, and she can sleep there. Which sounds a little more like another story. But anyway, she went to the local inn, and she was taken in there, and there was a picture of a pineapple on the wall. Which doesn't sound like another story. That I know. And anyway, she went in there, and yeah, she said ananas, which in her language, right, which no one at the time could make out, was the word for pineapple, which, I don't know if you realise, is the actual name for pineapple in several European languages, including Greek. And the manservant of the Worrells was Greek, and yet he couldn't make her out head or tails either. He couldn't understand her. So she wasn't Greek. She did appear to have a fascination with Chinese furniture, and even though she looked completely European, they thought maybe she's Chinese. Yes, so she went and stayed back at Worrell Park because even though they had a bed for her there, she didn't want to sleep on the bed. Until the Worrells' children, that was, showed her how comfortable the bed was. So she took a liking to the bed and she slept on the bed. Yeah, she was very strange, this young lady. She was a very good fencer, which at the time may have been a little unusual for one. However, occasionally she'd slip and she'd hit the hammer on her thumb, and no, not really. She was a very good fencer, like as in a sword fighter, and she also used to swim naked in the lake, which Mr. Worrell found quite intriguing. Maybe, I don't know. She used to, she didn't eat meat. She only ate vegetables and drank water. And she drank tea. And before she drank tea, she'd go through this elaborate prayer, and then she'd drink the tea with one hand over her eye. And then before a second cup, she would go through the entire ritual again and wash the cup. So she kind of mystified everyone. She had this completely ineligible language, and she prayed to her god Tala Allah, whom she worshipped from the tops of the trees. What else? That's right, she also made her own handmade bows and arrows. There you go. Don't know if that was unusual at the time or not. Romantic intellectuals at the time thought that she was, well, they didn't know, did they? They thought maybe she was from China or something. She wrote down some of her language and they sent it to Oxford, and they came out with a reply that it's humbug. They didn't know. Yes, the aristocracy in England fell in love with her and her mystical ways, and in fact the entire nation did. And no one knew where she was from until this Portuguese sailor met up with her, and he claimed to have spoken her language. And he said that in fact that she came from the island of Javuzu, right, some far off mystical island, and she had been taken by pirates, and she'd escaped and slipped overboard into the Bristol Channel and then made herself to England. So there you go. Anyway, yeah, the whole country became fascinated with this young lady and her mystical, intriguing ways. Until this lady called, I don't really know her name actually, the owner of a Bristol lodging house recognised her in the paper, and she said she was, in fact, Mary Baker, the daughter of a cobbler in Devon. And she was exposed as a fraud. Okay? She was, in fact, a very poor young lady who had grown up wandering around the countryside and working in workhouses and so forth, scraping to make by, and she had fabricated this entire story. The press, however, had become fascinated with her, and this had created another wave of fame, because now she was seen as a heroine of the lower classes, in that she had effectively made a complete fool of so many experts and a lot of the aristocracy. And at that time, remember, in post-Napoleonic Britain, that was quite fashionable, right? I mean, Napoleon himself had done pretty much the same. He started off from the lower classes, and he moved up the ranks, and he had almost become emperor of the entire continent of Europe, hadn't he? So the Worrells didn't know what to do, so they sent her off with 3 very religious ladies to America. And on the way to America, supposedly she escaped, and she slipped over and she went and met up with Napoleon. But that was just fiction, just something to make the whole story a little more interesting, I think. She went to America, spent a few years in America, which we don't seem to know much about. And she returned to England in 1824. She had a daughter in 1829, and as you do, she ended up selling leeches to the Bristol Infirmary Hospital in her old age, and she died in 1864, aged 75. Well, there you go. What a fascinating life for the Princess Caraboo. And the Princess Caraboo was indeed a hoax. Well, there you go. Yet another mystery solved for you. Well, it would be fantastic if you could rate my video. Even better, subscribe. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next week. Bye.